So look where I get to be today. I tried this last week. Absolutely no audio came through, so we'll try it again. I guess if there was true social distancing, this would be it. Well, what I'm hoping to do, oh, and by the way, I am all safety conscious. Following the rules. So I'm hoping we can 5 gas test a few vehicles and buy ourselves some time should we ever be allowed to come back to the lab. So I do have some new vehicles. I do have a little bit of dated. We'll look at everything. So those little emissions tags are really identifying what the vehicle has to conform to for EPA regulations for particular model years. Maybe something out of the 80s basically says, I have a catalytic converter. That's it. So as we go up in model years, we start seeing things like low emissions vehicles, LEVs, super low emissions vehicles, SULEVs, zero emissions vehicles, ZLEVs. The newer the vehicle, the higher the standard. So again, '96 Ford Ranger basically says this vehicle contains a catalytic converter. That's about it. My tan Chevy truck is just federal emissions. My Subaru is a ULEV, ultra low emissions vehicle. Ultra low emissions. Ultra low emissions. Low emissions. If we had a hybrid in the lab, which I don't right now, but if we had a hybrid in the lab, we'd have an ultra low emissions vehicle. If we had the Chevy Volt, we would have a ZEV, or a zero emissions vehicle. So let's test a few of these, see the numbers that are giving us, and see if we can learn anything from them. Okay, let's look at what we have on the screen of our 5 gas tester. Upper left, hydrocarbon. For our purpose, hydrocarbon, or HC, we can think of as unburned fuel. Typically higher than normal hydrocarbon readings are a result of ignition problems. Upper right, carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is a product of poor combustion. The better our air-fuel ratio, the lower our carbon monoxide will be. Carbon dioxide, middle left. Carbon dioxide is a result of perfect combustion. We really want to see that somewhere between 14–16%. Middle right is oxygen. the oxygen module in this machine doesn't seem to be working properly. Realistically, it should be reading about 21% right now. Since we're not concerned about the oxygen content of our exhaust, we can ignore it. Bottom left is oxides of nitrogen, or NOx emissions. NOx is any form of oxygen and nitrogen mixed together. NOx emissions would be things like nitrous oxide, nitrous dioxide, hex oxide, things like that. NOx emissions are really bad for causing brown cloud, acid rain, other environmental issues. Bottom right, I have a lambda selected. Now I can select lambda or air-fuel ratio. Since we're going to be talking about lambda coming up, this is a good time to introduce it. Let's look at a Pontiac G5. Cold for the most part. Sniffers in the tailpipe. Let's immediately go to startup, see what our numbers do. We can see the fuel dumped in from the cold start. Really not any richer than what the Ford Ranger was. I'm watching carbon monoxide to see when it starts to drop. Okay, we just hit closed loop. We can see carbon monoxide falling away. Catalytic converter still is not hot. So if this vehicle did not have a catalytic converter, this is all the better it could possibly do emissions wise. Now, we force some heat through it, we can get to light a little bit faster. Now that we've got the cat good and hot, carbon monoxide is almost non-existent. Remember, we should be under 30 parts per million for hydrocarbon. Well under that. Now, if I was to snap the throttle, pump a little bit of fuel in, we'd see that. A little bit extra fuel. And there's the catalytic converter controlling it. Not bad for a cute little 4-cylinder. Let's try something with a little bit faster computer. So there's startup. We're already in closed loop. Cat's already hot. Took well under a minute for it to hit legal standards. I bet if we got that cat good and hot, we can get it even cleaner. Looks pretty darn good. Remember, specs 30 parts per million or less for hydrocarbon, 0.3 to 0.5% for carbon monoxide. Oxides of nitrogen should be below 100 at idle, below 1,000 ever. CO2 14 to 16% typically. And we can see my lambda is 1.0. We are running exactly stoichiometric. So let's try something really new. 2019. I'm preparing myself to be impressed. So there's startup. A little bit of richness for startup. We're in closed loop already. Cat's hot. Been running way less than a minute. This thing I bet can hit zeros in no time flat. That's pretty impressive. Again, I bet we let it get really hot. I bet it hit zero. Find out. Let's try that. Well, since we're allowed 30 parts per million, and we're at like 2, 3, it'll hit 0 eventually. That's pretty darn clean in a very short period of time. Very impressive. Okay, let's really impress ourselves. 2020. Reading to start with. Real time. No revving, just start up. So there's my fuel from startup. There's closed loop. Cat's ready and warming up. It's hot. We are already way below. Well, there we go. Zero is pretty much across the board. Perfect air-fuel ratio. Got to be under a minute. Very impressive. Okay, time for a bad example. Let's say you run across the car without a catalytic converter. What is the overall difference between a car with and without just a catalytic converter? Let's find out. This is a normal, good running vehicle. No check engine light. Good O2 sensors. No cat. We can see it closed loop. That's all the better it's probably going to do for hydrocarbon. Well, it's kind of popping in and out of closed loop. We're back up to 0.4. So this is compared to my Ford. We could run about 90 of the Fords and get the same hydrocarbon emissions as what this Pontiac is doing. Let's see where we came from. So let's look at real old school. You build yourself a small block Chevy, do a carburetor on it, headers, no cat, nothing else. Here's where we're at. So we're just warming up right now. Hold on. It is carbureted. It takes a moment. So, small block Chevy, completely warmed up. We should be below 30 parts per million for hydrocarbon. 2,000 is probably too high. We should be 0.3% or less. Carbon monoxide is trying. If you look at lambda, lambda is 0.85. So this is running 11% on the rich side. But no matter what, that's where hydrocarbons are going to stay. 1,500, 2,000. Let's see just what a little bit of extra fuel will do. Here's a good example of why cars went to electronic throttle. So we saw 8,000 parts per million. It is falling away. But think of the overall difference in emissions between something built in 1975, 1980, and something built in 2020. Very impressive how far they've come.